No, I just want to say I read the commentary that they had collected from Rabbi Sachs on this week's Torah portion, and it was very sad to not actually hear his voice talking about it.
So to fill people in who are not familiar, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs passed away this past week. And actually, I am going to share something from his brilliant writings and teachings. He's a brilliant, brilliant scholar, and he became a Lubavitcher. He talks about it even, how he met the Rebbe and he became a Lubavitcher. Brilliant fellow, and his daughter eulogizes him. If you have 2 minutes, good morning,
Yeah.
Good morning.
2 minutes. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning.
Go on YouTube and look for the eulogy of his daughter. She writes what her father gifted her. Brilliant, Rabbi Sachs.
Yeah.
So, which is very interesting because this week's Torah portion. Anybody know what it is? Anybody want to share?
By Sarah.
Chayei Sarah.
Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. The life of Sarah. And it's very perplexing because what's the first passage when you open up the Torah portion?
Good morning, Freida.
Good morning, Kim.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Welcome.
Great.
Good morning, everyone.
Lovely to see everybody. Boker Tov. Vatama Sarah. And Sarah passes away Bekiryat Arba, He Hebron. So she passes away in Hebron in the land of Israel. Now we know in the 5 books of Moses, every Torah portion represents what the Torah portion is about. Bereshis, Genesis, the creation of the universe, the world. Noach, the story of Noah and the flood. Lech Lecha, the journey of Abraham and Sarah. Vayera, God appears to Abraham. Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. What do you expect to read about?
Sarah.
Her life.
Her life.
Yeah.
Her life. What happened? What's going on in her life? Her diary, her history. You open it up, and sadly, you read about her passing.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone discusses, why is the Torah portion called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah? Now, before I go into that, and if anyone has some insight, please share. Another perplexing question. The Torah says she lived for 100 years. She lived for 20 years, and she lived for 7 years. Now, you tell me, how old was your father when he passed away? You'll say he was 92. You're not going to say 90 years and 2 years. So why does the Torah say she lived for 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years? Also go ahead. Somebody wanted to say?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, there were different areas of her life, different journeys, different parts of Chayei Sarah. She was a different person, or she accomplished different things in those different decades of her life.
So to emphasize the different phases or stages of her life, you're saying. Very nice, very interesting. There is a commentary that says that. I maybe didn't see it, but it is a very interesting idea. But tying that in then, I'll answer that question first, is because the Torah is trying to tell us, because remember always the universal rule of the Torah, the written Torah, is that there's no extra word, letter, or dot, or vowel in the Torah, in the written tradition. Much of the information we get, the Kabbalah, Hasidus, the insights, the commentaries, have to all be gleaned from the written tradition. And you have to go into the oral tradition, otherwise you don't get the true story, as we've seen over the weeks, where things look one way, but that's not really what happened. Or really what is happening in this story. So the Torah says 100, 20, and 7 to show us something very powerful. A 7-year-old girl, a 7-year-old child is pure, is innocent. Sarah's purity and innocence of a child transferred into her young adult life, into her 20s. And that's how she also transferred into when she turned 100 years old. Her standards, her morals, her ethics never deviate from her entire life. Sometimes a person starts out with a sketchy past, and then they rehabilitate themselves. They change their ways. I'm not the same girl you knew in college. I'm not the same guy you did business with. I'm a different person. Trust me, I'm a different person. I've changed. Sarah was the same kind, good, ethical, moral person when she was 100, when she was 20 and 27, and when she was 20 and when she was 7. The Torah wants to emphasize throughout her life, she never deviated from who she was as a righteous, kind, generous, good, strong person, believer in God. You know the story of Bella? Bella, the president of Hadassah? Bella was the president of Hadassah in Boston. And her whole life she dedicated. She was charitable. She was active in her synagogue. She was active in Hadassah. She's now 75 years old. She says, enough is enough. I'm going on vacation. I'm going to take a break. She buys herself a whole new wardrobe. She books herself a gorgeous vacation in the islands. And she packs up her new luxury luggage and she's on her way. And everything that could go wrong goes wrong in her life. She comes to the airport, she misses her flight. She arrives in the islands, they lost her luggage. She comes to the hotel, they gave away her beautiful suite that she ordered. And to top it off, she's going down to get herself a cocktail and she trips and she breaks her leg. They rush her to the hospital. She comes back to the hotel on crutches in agony. She's in the elevator in her big sun hat. She says, Almighty God, I don't understand what you're doing. A whole life, Bella Horowitz, me, I was the greatest, the best. I did everything you asked of me. All I want is a little vacation. You couldn't give me a little vacation, God? God looks down, he says, you, that's you, Bella? I didn't recognize you. Sorry. Okay, we'll make it good. Anyway, that's my footnote. Sarah, in her entire life, she was Sarah the matriarch. So now let's touch upon Chayei Sarah. So the Talmud says something very beautiful. Rishayim afilu b'chayeyem karim mesim. Evil people, negative people, even when they're alive, they're like dead people. V'tzadikim b'misasam karim chayim. But righteous people, good people, are even alive after they pass away. And that's why also it says about Jacob, Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Jacob, our patriarch, didn't die. What do you mean? He was buried by his children. Ma zara b'chayim, af hu b'chayim. His children are alive, so he's alive. So how do we tie this into Sarah? Anybody want to share?
Go ahead. She lived a righteous life, so she's still alive even for us.
Yes, exactly. To sum it up. In other words, when do you see a person's life? When they pass away. And that's what we touched upon a few months ago. We said, how can you understand death if you don't understand life, and vice versa?
Usually through someone's eulogy, you understand it more.
You see who they were.
Exactly, especially when you didn't know them, but you understand them and you have a greater understanding when they pass.
You hear about them. So my husband has a joke. There's two Torah portions connected. Acharei mos, which means after death. Kedoshim is another Torah portion called sanctity, the laws of sanctity. So my husband says many times a person's a scoundrel. When does at the funeral, everybody eulogizes him and says, oh, he was a holy guy. He was a great guy. In the meantime, they're whispering, he was a scoundrel. He was a thief. But everybody is lauding him because what are you going to say about the guy at his funeral? You're not going to tell the truth. But Sarah, her legacy, her teachings, her energy, her spark, as we'll soon see with her daughter-in-law, live on, because she had such an impact on civilization, on society, on her family, that everything about her lives on in the next generation and in the world. So, when you bake a chocolate cake, people tend to think, what's eternal? If you see it, if you smell it, if you hear it, if you touch it.
The calories.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. But what happens? The same thing with, you could say, a piece of chocolate cake. Once you eat it, it's gone. What's truly eternal is ideas, concepts, goodness, mitzvahs. That's eternal because they live on. So not always if you see it, smell it, hear it, or touch it, is it considered something that will be eternal. Sarah was eternal and is eternal because what she left behind, her legacy, her teachings, her goodness, her kindness. How many thousands of people she taught the concept of God, monotheism, belief in a creator. That's why the Torah portion is called the life of Sarah, to teach us, when do we see life? After a person passes on. If they are remembered, not only they remember, the family remembers who they were, the Baba, the Zayda, but the ideas, the concepts, the goodness, what they gave to this world continue on, that person is truly still alive. David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayam. King David is eternal. King of Israel. We sing a song even about him. David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayam.
David Melech Yisrael. Hi.
See, Diane, you even remember the hand motions. So Chai is Sarah, the life of Sarah. And then Avram, let's continue the story, goes. He has to bury his beloved wife. And it's really so sad. If you think about the story, it always touches me so deeply, because look what happens. Avram is told by God, remember last week, to bring his one and only son Yitzchak as a sacrifice, as an offering. At the last minute, of course, it was a test. The angel says no. But Sarah hears about the fact that her son is being brought as an offering. And then she has a heart attack and she passes away from the pain, from the sorrow. So Avram passed the test. His son passed the test, but they come back and Sarah has passed away. So life is painful. There's a victory because Abraham listened to God and passed the test. But there's also consequences. Sarah couldn't take the pain and the sorrow, and she passes away. And now Avram has to bury his wife. So he goes, you want us to ask something, Margaret? Oh, so he goes to purchase the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Now you'll say, why does he have to purchase it? God said to Abraham, I am giving you the land of Israel to you and all your children. So the Talmud explains something very beautiful, that though God gave the land of Israel in all of its entirety to Abraham and his descendants through Yitzchak, there are 3 pivotal parcels of land, prime real estate in Israel, that are documented in the Chumash and the Torah, that were purchased by the Jewish people, so that no one later on can contest the deed and say, no one purchased it. No one purchased it. Where do you have a deed? So the first parcel of land that was purchased is Abraham purchases from Ephron for 400 shekels, Hebron and the cave of Machpelah. First purchase, documented. Now Ephron says to Abraham, you're such a great person. You've done so much for our society. Let me give it to you as a gift. But Abraham says, absolutely not. I want to purchase it. I demand that I purchase it. And so he purchases it, knowing that there'll be a time it will be contested. And it's still contested. Right? It's still contested. The cave of Machpelah, Ma'aras HaMachpelah. It's still contested, even though we have the deed right here written. And it's very interesting. I want to read this to you. And he purchases 600,000 square cubits. Each cubit, based on measurement, symbolizes, says the Kabbalah, one person, an upright human being. 600,000 Jews and souls stood at Sinai to receive the Torah. 600,000 letters in the Torah, symbolizing every Jewish soul. Remember, many of us are resurrections and reincarnation, so many souls are here many times. Symbolic of the 600,000 cubits that Avram purchases in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. It means it belongs to every single Jew, his purchase. Now, why does he purchase the Ma'aras HaMachpelah? An interesting insight. Who's buried there already? Anybody remember? Margaret, I can't hear you.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve. Avram knew Adam and Eve were buried there. So he wants that very special cave for his wife. So Adam and Eve are buried there. Abraham and Sarah get buried there. Jacob and Leah, not Rachel. Remember, because Rachel is buried in Beit Lechem because she's intervener, a place for the Jewish people to pray, that very special place. That's why it's called the Cave of Machpelah. Machpelah means double-decker because they were buried in doubles. Interesting tidbit. So Avram purchases the Cave of Machpelah and he buries his beloved wife Sarah there. Now I just want to tell you the other two purchases because I want you to keep this in your memory bank. And the second purchase was made by King David, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He purchases it from Aravna the Jebusite, as it says in the book of the prophet Samuel 2. And the last documented purchase was done by Jacob from the Canaanite ruler Hamor, and he purchases Shechem, where Joseph, the tomb of Joseph. Remember what happened when the Israeli government gave it away to the Arabs? They took the tomb of Joseph and they destroyed the tomb of Joseph. This happened in few years ago. But these three pivotal pieces of property were purchased and documented in the Torah. Something very important we have to know in our memory banks, in our information, when someone says to you, what? Israel doesn't belong to the Jews. Prove it. This is a very, very important thing, again, written in the Torah that we need to know. Now, before we go into the most beautiful, beautiful story in this week's Torah portion, which is love at first sight and the first Jewish marriage, I want to just touch on something because we mentioned that Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs passed away this week. And I saw a beautiful insight from him that I want to share for just 1 minute. Mm-hmm. And Carrie, who's a disciple of Rabbi Sachs, mentioned it as well.
Yeah.
Look, remember we discussed the difference between Noah and Abraham. Why is Abraham the first patriarch, not Noah? Mm-hmm. So look at the end of the life of Noah. Remember that very controversial story? Noah plants a vineyard, he gets drunk, he falls asleep, he's uncovered, and there's a very negative happening there. Mm-hmm. Now look what happens, and you can't blame him. If you witness the destruction of the entire world, trust me, you'd also drink a couple of bottles of wine and get drunk and try to forget. So we're not blaming Noah. But now look what happens to Abraham. He just went through a lot of trauma. He almost kills his firstborn. You can imagine the emotional trauma he goes through, even though he's doing the will of God. It's very traumatic. Think about the time you thought you lost your child in the supermarket. You ever remember that moment? Your child wanders off and they hide under, they try, and you feel your kid was kidnapped. Your heart drops down to the bottom. And then they go, Ma! They jump out and you're ready to strangle them. He's just was about to sacrifice his one and only son. He comes home jubilant that he didn't. And look what happens. His wife is gone and he has to bury her. So let's see what happens when he comes. So listen to this. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So it says, and Avram came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So he mourns, he weeps, he cries. And then it says, Vayakam Avraham. Yeah, Avram gets up. And he sends his trusted servant to find a wife for Yitzchak. Tragedy, trauma does not hold him back. He gets up and he moves on. He realizes time for life to go on. Now I have to marry off my son, who's going to be the next patriarch, together with his wife, matriarch for our people. So what Torah, and I heard this from Jonathan Sachs in one of his essays, is trying to tell us. That's why Abraham is the first patriarch. His whole attitude, his whole way of dealing with challenges, traumatic events is proactive. And again, we're not faulting Noah. We're not trying to say, oh, Noah, why wasn't he like Abraham? Noah was a great man. It even says, Tzaddik b'doroso. He was a righteous person in his generation. He was a great man. But he's not the Avraham, the patriarch of the people. When something happens in life, it's very difficult to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But this is what we learned from an Avraham. Trauma, challenges, pain, ultimate pain. He lost his wife, his beloved wife, Sarah. And she was no ordinary woman, as we know. And he goes and now he moves on in life. This is an Avraham. This is an Avraham. Does anybody want? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it seems so horrible that God would challenge him. He does what God wants. His son, he almost kills his son. And then his wife dies because of that. So it seems like punishment or something, which it shouldn't be.
It's okay. Yes, it's the eternal question that we all have. Like, why, God? I did everything you told me. You couldn't afford me a little vacation. So I don't have right now an answer. Why did God allow Sarah to die? I don't have an answer this second. But suffice it to say that it's teaching us that, again, life had to go on. Life had to go on. And possibly in the last Torah portion, the last sentence, what does it tell us there? Rivka is born to Bethuel. It mentions an interesting little tidbit out of nowhere that Rebecca is now born in the previous Torah portion. Then the Torah portion opens up with Sarah's death. Could it be possible that now the next matriarch has to come into play, and we'll soon see that not that she's a reincarnation of Sarah, but we're soon going to see something very, very pivotal, how she steps into Sarah's shoes in a way that no other person could step in. So it is very possible that this is the continuation of our history in our lives. And also, we mentioned many times the Torah stories, the history. It's real life, real people. It's not doctored up. It's not made to look better than it is. This is what really happens in life. You have victories, triumphants, and God forbid, terrible tragedies happen in people's lives. And we don't know why. Why indeed did Sarah pass away? Give her a little nachas. Hi, Yitzchak, I'm so glad you're alive. You have no idea. I was almost on my deathbed because of this. We don't know why this happens.
Is
But
it to show that she has some, not being like a mortal, but being not 100% without reproach, that even she would be hit that hard, that she's not above being hit as hard to take it where she would die from it. You know what I'm trying to say?
right, but also based on what we said, she's really alive, and we'll soon see
Yeah.
her life lives on in Rivka. So there's a very powerful thing I'm going to share, but I want to share it in context.
Yeah.
But remember, you can't, not to critique you, but remember the Torah says 127. The Torah especially emphasized that there was no punishment here because she was pure from the moment she's born till the moment she passes on. So we cannot contradict that because it's so evident in the Torah that this was not a punishment. It's not saying in any which way, oh, she did something wrong, there she goes. God forbid. No. So we cannot use that line of reasoning more that it was her time to go for whatever reason, you know, but her sparks are there. Her energy is there. Her life is there. And you know what? This is my own thought, and I'm not sure. So I'll just share it. That maybe that's why also the Torah portion is Chayei Sarah, to show us. Do not think for a moment just because Sarah passes on in the physical realm that she's really not living on. She really is alive. She is living on. So maybe that's what it's also teaching us. Not to for a minute think, oh, look, she gets taken for whatever reason. Negative reason. You understand what I'm saying, Carrie?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's go to a very romantic story, a very happy story, a very interesting story, and also a very perplexing story. So Avram goes to his trusted servant. And now it doesn't even tell us the name of the servant. And the reason I'm mentioning this is, again, we see that the story in the Torah, you have to analyze, read the commentaries, the oral tradition, Chassidus, Kabbalah, to get what really happens here. So Avram goes to his trusted servant, and the commentaries say none other than his chief of staff, Eliezer. And he says to Eliezer, I want you to leave the land of Israel and go find a wife for my son Yitzchak in Haran. Now, Haran was Turkey or Iraq. Now, it wasn't exactly a golden Medina there. You would think Avram would tell Eliezer, bring me a wife from our community here in Israel. I need a good sabra, a nice Israeli girl that knows how to cook, a good falafel, a good knish, a good Israeli, make a good Israeli hummus. He wants a wife from where he came from, Haran, which we know was not a land of milk and honey. People there were very corrupt. We'll soon see why he wants a wife from there. And we find out it's Eliezer. He takes 10 camels, and there's 67 passages, 67 pesukim, only on this whole piece of how he finds a wife for Rivka. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because we've discussed that the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, are more condensed than Herman Wouk's Winds of War or Harry Potter's Sorcerer's Stone. The Torah is a smaller book, has less words than some of our best-selling novels. But 67 passages only on this story? Why? So we'll soon see. But in a nutshell, it's the first Jewish marriage. Hey, good morning, Rochelle. Nice to see you. The first Jewish marriage. Because, and the first maybe shidduch, although we could say Adam met Chava, God was the matchmaker. But the first match made in heaven, they're all made in heaven. So 67 passages, because in these 67 passages, the most pivotal lessons and foundation of Jewish marriage comes to play. especially since it's the next matriarch of our people, Rebecca, the famous Rebecca. So what happens? It's it's such a great story even when you teach kids because it's so full of excitement. So Eliezer takes 10 camels and he travels, and of course gifts, because if he finds the girl, he has to give a little jewelry, right? You got to make a shidduch here. Don't come empty-handed, please. You want my daughter? Where's the dowry? You know, when we had our 8th daughter, my husband went to shul in the morning to name the baby, to name her, to our shul, Beth Ezra Chabad. So he walks in and he says, guys, I had a baby girl. It was the 8th girl, and everyone looks at him like, oy vey, poor guy. So one fellow says, Rabbi, you're going to need 8 dowries. So my husband, without missing a beat, says, what? The boys are going to give the dowries. My girls, the boys are going to give the dowries. And then they said Mazel Tov. They were excited for us. Okay. So he brings jewelry, of course, and now he needs a plan. Avram says to God, Charon. It's like me saying, okay, Celia, I'm sending you to the state of New York. Go find me a girl for my son. Where are you going to go? What do you mean? There's no internet. There's no J-date. How do you find a girl in a huge city of people, in a huge state? So a very interesting thing happens. Instead of, first of all, a 17-day journey, it turns into a 3-hour journey. God gets him there in a record amount of time. So Eliezer is a very intelligent man. He says, where does everybody gather in those days? At the well. Everybody needs water. Everybody needs to shower and bathe and wash their dishes and drink and cook and bake. Everybody needs water. I'm going to go to the well, and there, hopefully, I'll spot a girl. But how? So the passage reads, Vayomer Eliezer el Elokim. And Vayomer, the word in God that Eliezer speaks to God, is called a shalsheles. Shalsheles is a curvy figure to teach the Torah reader, when he reads it in the synagogue, to make an interesting tune. So shalsheles goes like this. Vayomer, Vayomer. Like a broken record. Remember the olden days if the needle got stuck on a spot on the record? Yeah. Joe, please move the record. So a shalsheles in the Torah reading is like this. To show us that there's something ambivalent going on in this passage. There are 3 other shalsheles in the Torah readings, but this is the first one we read about. Eliezer is going through a moment of ambivalence. So he's talking to God. He says, God, how am I going to find a girl for Abraham's son? So why was there ambivalence? So the commentaries tell us 3 very important things. One, he had a beautiful daughter. Before he left, he was imagining his daughter would marry Yitzchak. Why not? He grew up in the whole house of Abraham. Eliezer, like I said, he's called a servant, but he's really a very high caliber person. My daughter marry Yitzchak. So he has ambivalence with the mission. That's the first reason it's a shalshelet. The second reason it's a shalshelet, he says to God, you know how I'll know if this girl is the one? If she comes to me and offers me water to drink, because I'm a traveler, but also offers water for my camels, an additional act of kindness, I'll know she's the one. But he has doubt after he says this. Who says that this is a good sign? Just because she gives me water and the camels water, who says she's the next matriarch? Maybe it's not such a good sign that she's the next matriarch. So he has doubt. And the third and final reason he has a doubt, because he's creating an omen. And we know in Torah, even though they didn't have the giving of the Torah yet, they practiced the mitzvahs. You're not allowed to have omens. You're not allowed to look out of the window, see a deer jumping off your cross of your lawn and say, I'm not going to work today. It's a sign my business dealings are going to fail. Or what else? You're walking, what else do they say is an omen? Who else has omens here?
Black cat.
A black cat. A black cat came running down the driveway. Uh-oh. The kids can't go to school today. You never know, something bad's going to happen in our lives. So according to Torah, we cannot rely on omens. It's like witchcraft. We can't depend on omens, witchcraft, fortune tellers, palm readers. It's against halacha, Jewish law, to go to a palm reader and say, what's my future? You're not allowed to do that. I have a joke, but I think I told it already, so I don't want to be repetitive about palm readers. So Eliezer has doubt. Maybe I'm not allowed to. Maybe this is considered an omen, but we know it's not because he didn't say, "Oh, I saw a rooster jumping, and that's going to be That's how I know it's going to be the girl." He said, "If she's kind, then we know she's the girl." So he has ambivalence. He has doubt. Okay, so he sees a girl walking with a jug, and you'll see why I'm mentioning every detail. It's important to the story. I'm not trying to be boring. So he sees a girl walking, a Shayna Maidel, and she has a giant jug of water on her shoulder. Already means she already filled up the jug to bring home. So he approaches her. He says, maybe I could have a little water, he says to her. So the Torah describes that she takes the jug, she lowers it down, and she pours him some water to drink until he's satiated. So now her jug is half empty. So then she says to him, and perhaps I can also water your camels? And he says, yeah. And the Torah describes how she runs to the well and she fills up her pitcher. She runs back to the trough, refills it, and keeps going back and forth until the 10 camels are satiated. And 3 times the Torah says she ran until the camels were satiated. She filled the trough until the camels are satiated. Until the camels are satiated, she didn't stop filling the trough. 3 times the Torah tells us this. Now think about it. 10 camels till they're satiated, the Torah tells us. Now, who here is a Dr. Doolittle? Who knows about camels? Anybody? Camels have what? A giant hump.
A hump, yeah.
They hold on to water.
Dairy.
For how many months? I looked it up. Who can guess? Because I looked it up. I couldn't believe it. Just give a guess.
3 months?
More?
6 months?
6 months. 6
Wow.
to 7 months, camels can travel through the desert with water in their hump. And when the water depletes, the fat from the hump sustains them till they can refill.
Wow.
Human beings can only last without water, I think I read, for 5 weeks. I don't know. I don't even know. I don't know if I could survive one day. Now, why is this relevant? Because the Torah is telling us how many times she had to go back and forth from the well, which was not near the trough. How do you know? Because it says she ran. If it was right near each other, like my washer and dryer, right? I take from my washer to the dryer. I'm not running. I'm just passing over. The well was not near the trough, so she had to go back and forth at least 20, 30 times, I figured out, till all 10 camels are satiated. And it says she goes down into the well, so she has to walk down steps. This was a workout. Okay? So the description of how, to what extent she went to feed the camels is just unbelievable. Now let the plot thickens. He travels with 10 camels and a whole entourage. She could have said, hello? Oh, yeah, you need water? Oh, you know what? It's a very beautiful well. And there's the trough. And I see your fellows over there. I'll give them a few buckets, and you know what? Gesund behaved. Take as much water as you like. Go ahead, guys. Feed your camels. Right? I would have said that. I would have even thought it even like, what? He has 10 guys. He's asking me for water? Not only that, she thinks to herself, the Torah tells us, you know, he's coming to me for water. Something must be wrong with him. He's an able-bodied man. He came over to me, said, may I have water? Means he can't go down to the well himself. She's thinking. He must have had disability or something happened to him. I'm not going to say, oh, sir, why can't you go get water? He asked me for water, means he can't get water. I'll get the water. That's why she feeds the camels too, because she assumes something is wrong. Otherwise, why would he ask me for water? Look how she thinks. Now, in case you're thinking it's COVID-19, when he drinks from her pitcher directly, remember it says he drank and he was satiated? Just another interesting tidbit. Now, what is she thinking? Oy vey, I can't bring home this pitcher of water to the house. He might have germs. He might have the flu. He'll give it to the whole family. So she pours the rest of the water into the trough, thinking, oh, you know, I'll go home now with fresh water. I'll rinse out my pitcher. No one will see. I won't embarrass him. You might say that's her cheshbon, right? She fed the camels because she didn't want to embarrass him. So she figured, oh, let me pour the water in the trough. Oh, this is for the camels. And then secretly, she washes out the pitcher, she sanitizes it and brings it home. But that's not the case because she goes back 20, 30 times to satiate the camels too. So in case you're thinking she was just being overly polite and safe, that's why she offers water to the camels. So whatever way you look at it, this was not kindness. This was extreme kindness. This was kindness that goes beyond anything anybody can imagine. She's either 3 years old, the Torah tells us, or 14 years old, but whatever age. Look how she extends herself to Eliezer. When he sees this, he realizes this is the girl for my Yitzchak, for my Avram's Yitzchak. And he immediately takes out the ring. He doesn't even wait. And he goes over to her and he says, where do you live? And she says, oh, do you need lodgings? And he says, yes. And she takes him to her house. And he presents her with a half shekel ring. And he tells the parents, I'm Eliezer. I have a master Avraham. And by the way, Rivka is Avraham's cousin, is Yitzchak's cousin, because Besuel, her father, was the nephew of Avraham. Besuel, her father, was the nephew of Avraham. And he says, I have a half a shekel ring, and I have this jewelry and that jewelry. I would like to present a match for your daughter, Rivka. And they say, ask her. And she says, absolutely. And he spends the night. And he wakes up in the morning. And Besuel had passed away during the night because he agrees to the match, but he wants to take advantage of Eliezer. He's going to try to rob him of all of his money. And he poisons Eliezer's food, but God switches it on him. And he ends up dying from the poison. And the next morning, he's nowhere to be found, the Torah says. Where's Besuel? It just says Lavan and her mother, Mikla. And she goes with Eliezer to travel towards Canaan, the land of Israel, to meet her betrothed. This is what happens. I want to take one step backwards before I see what happens. Love at first sight in 1 second. Now the question is, why a half a shekel? You're giving jewelry. Avram was so wealthy. Couldn't he already make the weight of the ring a full shekel? Like a half a carat diamond? Round it up to 1 carat, you tell the jeweler. I could afford it. Also, we want her to come. You give her a diamond that's a little bit too small, she'll say, oh, well, not a 1 carat diamond, I'll come. A half a carat diamond, a half a shekel ring. No, thank you. The reason is what we touched upon, the 67 passages, that everything in the story is a lesson for us in our relationships, in our marriages. This is the first Jewish marriage. Half a shekel. What else is a half a shekel mentioned in the Torah? But
Purim.
Purim, very good, right? Purim. And in the tabernacle and the Beit HaMikdash, they were all, every Jew was asked to bring a half a shekel tzedakah, required. Every person, a Jewish person, was asked to bring a half a shekel. Why only a half a shekel? So the Torah says to teach us, whether you're the wealthiest Jew or the poorest Jew, everybody only can bring a half a shekel. There's no discrimination. There's no disparity between any Jew. And each half equals a whole.
Oh.
To teach us that we are never whole without another Jew. Unity is about being completed with our people, with Klal Yisrael, with the people of Israel. And the same thing now in the marriage. Your soulmate, your partner in life is your other half. So the half a shekel ring is a pivotal lesson that we are never whole. We are half. In a marriage, in a relationship, we are only half. We're half. The other half completes us. We have to depend on each other, complement each other. This is what a real relationship is, where every person has a say and every person adds to the relationship, completes the relationship. And under the chuppah, you become one. Both half shekels become one shekel, united as one. That's why the ring is a half a shekel. Two halves equal a whole. And this is the message of the half a shekel in the ring. And also in every way we look, our relationship with God, our relationship with our brethren, that each of us depends on the other. We cannot be complete if we are not in it together. So he gets the half a shekel, and the analogy of Rivka, that she is a rose among thorns. She grew up in a very corrupt family life. They were thieves. They were swindlers. Even here, Besuel wants to swindle Eliezer. He tries to poison him. Of course, God doesn't let. The angel switches the food and he gets poisoned and he passes away. So Rivka grew up, maybe what you want to call a mafia family, seeing her brother, her father in their dealings. And yet she retains her ethical, moral standards in spite of being surrounded by not only a family, society. Haran was known for corruption, idolatry. Their way of life was not what you and I would, barbaric. So that's why she's called a rose among thorns. And if you're a botanist, did I pronounce that right, Dr. Schulman? A botanist?
Yes.
If you're a botanist, there's a very interesting tidbit I read, is that when the thorn of the rose pierces the membrane of the rose leaf, a beautiful scent and aroma comes out of the rose. So the thorn of the corruption in her life, dishonesty, immorality of her society actually brought out in her the best. Where she was a rose. She said, I don't want to be like that. I'm never going to be like that. So in her own way, she was a revolutionary, just like her father-in-law and her future father-in-law and mother-in-law. She went against the tide. And we'll see later why Yitzchak had to get away from Haran, because she's called upon with her twin sons to identify deceit and identify immorality and lack of ethics so that she could stand up to it. Sometimes you grow up so innocent, you never see anything. You grow up with a silver spoon. You don't know what real life is like. You can't combat. You can't rise up because you never experienced challenges. Rivka came from such a depraved society, and she retained her royalty as a, as what do you want to say, as a princess. So she, when she sees corruption, when she sees deceit, she recognizes it because she grew up with it. If you never see it, like unlike Yitzchak grew up we have to say, with a silver spoon in his mouth, in a sense. He grew up with Avram and Sarah. He never left the land of Israel, Yitzchak. He's marrying a wife from the tough, what do you call it? He's from the hood. He's marrying a wife from the hood. That's a good way.
She has street smarts. She has
Exactly.
street sickle.
Yeah. But also there was really no compelling reason other than she is Rebecca, that she rises above her family life. You got to say something about that. Yes, Celia. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I don't know. Are you going to get into the whole issue of why Abraham says she must come here? And are you going to get into that? Because that seems to be a very important part of this parsha. The whole, like, he will not go there. She must follow you and come here.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't call it following. I would call it more where Yitzchak doesn't leave the land of Israel. He had a very pure soul. Rivka goes there because, first of all, as the new matriarch who's going to assume the position of her mother-in-law, right? She's becoming now the matriarch.
Yeah.
Her journey has to be in the land of Israel. The journey, because remember, God tells Abraham and Sarah, Lech lecha. The same thing applies to her. Her now journey must be to travel the same way her mother-in-law left Haran, remember? Her journey will take her to the land of Israel because that is where they're going to build the next generation of Jewish people. So that's why so it's not so much as following as more as fulfilling her destiny. This is her destiny. This is her journey. Now, let's say she said, no, I don't want to go. She could have said free choice. Eliezer says to her father even says, Rivka, do you want to go with this strange man to a strange land? And she says, yes. Yes. Don't forget, she heard about Abraham. Everyone heard about Abraham. He was famous. He was on the cover of People magazine, the New York Times. Like we said, the whole story of Yitzchak was publicized, what happened there. And she knew who her cousin was. So she wanted to go. So now good. So this is a good lead in. So now she gets on her camel and they bring her, she gets escorted to the land of Israel. And as she enters the borders and comes closer, she sees in the distance an extremely handsome, tall, good-looking guy that's in the field. And actually they said he was praying mincha, the afternoon service. That's how we know there's an afternoon prayer. And she topples off her camel because she's so love at first sight. She's so enthralled by what she sees before her. How lucky could she get? Not only he's a righteous guy, he's an extremely good-looking guy. She topples off her camel and she covers her face with her scarf. That's how you have the badekin. And Yitzchak comes before her. And by the way, this is the second time love at first sight is documented in the Torah. The first time, who can guess? Adam sees Chava, and Chava sees Adam. They both wake up from the slumber. Oh, what a beautiful sight before me. Let's get married. Oh, there's no one else around anyway. There's no competition to get married. The second, the Kabbalah tells us is this: Rivka sees Yitzchak and Yitzchak sees Rivka. It's love at first sight. Wow, beautiful. By the way, though, we have to know that if it's not love at first sight, it still could be a very happy marriage. You don't have to have love at first sight. As a matter of fact, they say if it's love at first sight, it's likely not to sustain itself because you can't jump up too high and stay there. Just an interesting thing. But she sees Yitzchak, and I want to read what happens then. So now Yitzchak meets Rivka, and look what happens. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing that happens. Now remember, Eliezer said, she's the one for you. But now, how does he know she's the one for him? This is how he knows. Okay, let me a second. I just want to read it because it's so beautiful in the Torah reading. Okay, hold on. Okay. So it says like this. So he's davening in the field, and he lifted up his eyes, and he saw, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rivka lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Yitzchak, vatipo me'al hagamel, she tumbles off the camel because she's so overwhelmed. And she says to the guy who's leading the camel, who is that? He says, that's Yitzchak. Now look what happens. Vayiva'eha Yitzchak, and Yitzchak brings her, ha'ohala Sarah imo, into the tent of his mother Sarah. Vayikach as Rivka, and then he takes Rivka, but tehilo liisha, and she becomes his wife. Now look what it says. So he marries her, vaye'ohevaha, and he loved her. Okay, so look at the order of things. So let's start with the tent. Ha'ahola Sarah, the tent of his mother. Rashi says the ha in Hebrew, it's something called hey hayidiyah, which means it's highlighting the word. It's not like, I'm bringing you to my house. It's the house, the tent, which means that there's something unique and special about this tent. What was unique and special about his mother's home? Who remembers from all the stories? What was something special about Sarah? And when she died, these three things went away. The first...
the cloud over the tent.
When Sarah was alive, over her home was a beautiful cloud of God. The Spirit of God, the presence of God was over her tent. The second thing, who remembers? When she lit her Shabbat candles on Friday, 18 minutes before sunset, public service announcement, they never went out. They remained lit the entire week till the next Friday when she relit a new set of candles. Her candles, by miracle, remained lit the entire week. And the third thing that was Sarah's gift was her challah that she baked. It had a unique and special taste. Whoever ate from it felt a special energy and spark. And I want to just share one insight about this. What does this mean? They felt a special energy and spark. She was a good cook, very good. She was a good chef. She was a good baker, wonderful. But what happens now, just a human interest insight. You meet a woman like Sarah, beautiful, dresses to kill, designer clothes, aristocratic, brilliant, kind, giving, has a beautiful family, a beautiful home, who designed your beautiful tent with the 4 doors and your window treatments. You meet a woman like that, what do you think to yourself? Wow, I'm so jealous. I'll never be like that. I mean, look at me. I need to lose 10 pounds. My house looks like a bazaar. I'm not exactly the smartest. Designer clothes, I don't even know where to get designer clothes and put them together. You end up feeling resentful, jealous, or you feel low because you can never be as great as that woman. Or it happens all the time. You meet someone, wow, she has everything. She has the perfect life. Wow. So you admire them, but you might also feel a little jealous, resentful, or feel you can't match up to them. When you met Sarah, this is what it means, her bread, her challah had a blessing and a spark. You left her presence empowered. I'm going to be just like her. I'm going to be just like Sarah. I know I could do it. She left you with such a feeling of empowerment that you could be a Sarah. Now that's a leader. That's a matriarch. That's a Sarah. That's what it means. Her bread had a special blessing, the Kabbalah explains. You felt empowered to be like her. That's how she affected you. So when you came to her house and drank a cup of coffee with her and had a little piece of her challah, you left her thinking, wow, yeah, I think belief in one God is a good idea. And I'm going to start implementing those values that she has. I like what she said. I liked what she shared. I like the whole aura. I want to have the same thing in my home. That's how she affected change. It is precisely that she had that energy that she was able to transfer to others, not in a way where like, oh, she's so perfect. Wow, I don't really want to hang out with her. She makes me look bad. I thought I knew how to put on makeup. Forget it, it's all over. Her makeup, perfect, like a makeup artist. She left you feeling empowered. So now Sarah passes away. And one of the tragedies is not only she's gone, those 3 things disappear. Avram lit Shabbos candles. When the candle finished, it finished. Avram maybe baked challah. Okay, great. It tasted okay. Nothing like Sarah's. And the cloud of Hashem left. Now you would say, well, Avram was just as great. But Sarah had a special holiness and specialness about her. Now Yitzhak doesn't know she's the right one. Eliezer said she has kindness, extreme kindness. She's just like your mother and father. Her kindness supersedes any kindness I ever met. Now Yitzhak has to see for himself. He brings her into the tent. And suddenly he sees a cloud appear over the tent. Okay, good. Very nice. Comes Friday, she lights the Shabbos candles. And they also don't go out. And when she bakes challah, the same thing. It has a unique taste, a unique spark. Now Yitzhak says, she's the one. We know she has extreme kindness. Very good. But now we know she also is almost a reincarnation. Her soul, her spiritual energy is a continuation of Chayei Sarah, my mother's life. So he marries her. He marries her. Now he knows she's the one. Time for the wedding. And then what does it say, the last word? And then he loved her. So the commentaries say love is a term for intimacy. Now he married her, he's intimate with her. But there's a Kabbalistic question here, Hasidic question, Hasidus. Many times when it talks about intimacy between husband and wife in the Torah, it says Yada Baita. He knew her, which means he was intimate with her. Because true intimacy between husband and wife can only be achieved if you know the person, if you appreciate the person. Then you can be truly intimate with a husband and a wife. Sometimes you have an argument, right? This is the difference between men and women. You have an argument. She wants to talk it out. Honey, we have to talk it out. We're not going to get angry. He says, come on, let's go. And they have intimacy. They never resolve the issues under there. Yada ishta, he knew his wife, she knew him, means they knew the only reason their intimacy was so profound is because there was a cohesiveness in the relationship. Now let's go back why the Torah uses the word love here. Remember, this is the first Jewish marriage. That even though it was love on first sight, superficially speaking, she saw him and said, wow, and he sees her and it's like, wow. But the true love can only emerge after marriage. You think you're in love with the guy. He thinks he's in love with the girl. And on some level you are. Otherwise, why are you getting married? But true love, true understanding, which brings true love, true respect can only be attained after the wedding, after the marriage. True intimacy after the marriage. You think, love, yeah. True love is when you go through life with challenges, children, arguments, sometimes pain, the trials and tribulations. Then you can, and you love your spouse because you've gone through all these things together. So true love emerges after your life together, or during your life together, rather, not after. During your life together. You meet people that go, I love her more, or I love him more than even during the honeymoon period. That's true love. And that's why the Torah says they got married and then he loved her and she loved him. Because that's exactly how it happens. Rabbi Friedman told me, he's a teacher, Rabbi Manis Friedman, so he told an interesting story. He said he gets a call from two guys who are going on a camping trip with their girlfriends, Jewish couples, and they go, Rabbi, we're going camping, but even when we go camping, we want to buy kosher food. So tell us how to do it, because we never went camping kosher. He said, no. They go, Rabbi, we didn't even tell you what we're buying. He said, no. Not kosher. And they go, Rabbi, we didn't even give you the menu. He says, no, it's not kosher. Your whole camping trip is not kosher because you're not married. You're gonna count together 110 for you and her, and 110 for you and her. What, you're gonna be looking at each other the whole camping trip? Not kosher. Don't even discuss the food. He said, your whole trip isn't kosher. Get married first. He tells them. He's telling this to our class in Yeshiva College, that he was giving us a class. He said, not kosher. And the guy's like, what is he talking about? Not kosher. I didn't even tell him what I'm buying. Not kosher. So Yitzhak loves Rivka, and Rivka loves Yitzhak. This is the quintessential marriage. Rivka and Yitzhak, the partnership, and we'll see later, next Torah portion, how they're challenged by their children. They don't have an easy child. We'll soon see. Because sometimes you look and go, oh, they had the perfect life. As we saw in the past, it wasn't perfect. Avram loses his wife, Sarah, just when things quiet down a little bit, right? And the next generation comes forth, the Yitzhak and the Rivka, beautiful marriage, beautiful life, and we'll see what happens. So, Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. I always think to myself, what am I going to be remembered for? I better start working. I better start going. You want your children to be able to say, Chayei Sarah, what was the life all about? What did he or she leave us for the next generation? So something to ponder, something to think about. Does anybody have any questions?
Nope.
I knew when I made spaghetti and meatballs that my mother